Yes, the point that Advocate Hemraj puts to me, which I must put to you, I don't know where your instructions come from, but you remember the evidence was that the first tear gas canister was fired by Warrant Officer Kuhn from the left-hand side of the police as they were proceeding behind the strikers. Thereafter, Lieutenant Beloy, from near the one of the Inyalas, the Inyala he was in, fired a stun grenade, and then there was what could be described as chaos, attacks and whatever, assaults and so forth. And after that, as I understand it, according to Lieutenant Colonel von Mark's statement, he then threw stun grenades from the helicopter. Now, I must tell you, my impression is that the stun grenade you referred to, remember, it goes off twice, so you get two explosions. I must confess, I thought was Beloy's one. And that was the evidence, too, that we've had. Now, if the stun grenade you pointed to was the first one we can see on the video clip, then it's undoubtedly Beloy's one, because his was the first. And I take it that the first tear gas we see is what one can call Kuhn's tear gas. So that's my understanding. If I'm wrong on that, then you must please tell me. But that's certainly the way we understanding of the three of us here, the three commissioners. So, but I put that to you so you can deal with it as you consider appropriate.
Yes, Chair. Perhaps if we could
so I think Mr. Ngulwana has got his hand on the button of his microphone. It looks as if he wants to say something too. He may also be of help.
Well, at the risk of delivering a concurring judgment, you could add the police are also in agreement with your recollection of what the evidence was, Chair.
That's the kind of concurrence that we can accept. Thank you. Mr. Drew?
Yes, Chair. And
I'm not sure how it affects the validity of the point you're seeking to make.
It doesn't.
The factual basis of it may well be incorrect.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. My instructions accord with the evidence as recounted by the Chair. At this stage, and this line of cross-examination will be developed further, so this point is actually preliminary to my next point. Major General, the point is simply this. From what we see on the video, and in particular, 2 stun grenades being thrown from a helicopter into the crowd, does not comply with the safety considerations that are in the SABC.
I'm sorry, do we see that on the video? You see, that's the point of my intervention. If what we see is not stun grenades being thrown from the helicopter, I mean, for example, we don't see a helicopter on the video clip at all, though it may be, of course, higher up than we can see. But my impression is that the stun grenade we saw, with the 2 explosions, was Beloy's stun grenade, which was thrown from the ground. Now, I'm not sure what roll it down means, but presumably he should have rolled it along the ground rather than throwing it. But that's a matter you can ask him, presumably, when he comes. And for Mark can also be asked about what he did from the helicopter. But at the moment, I haven't seen what seems to me to be unmistakably stun grenades thrown from the helicopter. That's my problem.
There's another point, Chair, with your leave. Another point, Chair, with your leave, is our little friend hasn't even established that what we see are protesters and not policemen.
Chair, to that point, regardless of whether it's being thrown at the protesters or the members, it's not in compliance with the safety considerations.
Chair, no, I have never suggested that stun grenade was thrown at policemen. The simple point I'm making, she hasn't established that the people we see there are not policemen, but are rather protesters. You can't assume things and put...
well, sorry. I think the answer to that may be, if one rolls the clip back, if that's the correct verb, you see strikers marching in a column. And you remember the evidence was that the police were in a semicircular arc behind them. And I must confess, my impression was that the people we see here on the clip at the moment were people who were previously part of that column. But if we look at the clip earlier than this, I think that point may disappear. But the major point that Mr. Leroux's got is it looks as if the stun grenade she's relying on was not for Mark's stun grenade, but Lloyd's. And therefore, if that's so, the whole premise on which the question is based would be incorrect.
Mr. Ngulwane, can you assist me with the origin of this document? Because I'd like to understand the context in which these safety considerations are suggested.
That's the question we wanted to put with respect, Commissioner.
But
we
it's a
understand
SABC
it comes
document,
from
isn't it?
us. We understand it comes from us, but we don't know what the status of it is, because when we discovered this document, we discovered everything that we consider to be relevant. But what the actual status of it, it's like, for example, there was a document on public policing that we provided, but it was a draft document, we had no official status, but we provided it nonetheless.
Well, are you able to tell us whether there's something that precedes this first page? Is it an annexure to a document? Do you know at all?
Apparently, it was part of a presentation training on training, but we don't know what slides precede this.
You gave the document to them on the basis of the relevance. I take instructions on the exact status of it. It's obviously, it looks to me like a police document because it talks about members must be warned before throwing, and that's obviously an reference to members of the service.
Perhaps it might have been useful if our learned friend had provided the entire document, Jane.
So the number of problems have been raised. I understand the point that you're seeking to make. Perhaps you could approach it slightly differently by asking the Major General if he knows what safety considerations should be applied in the case of stun grenades, from his own knowledge as a Major General and so on. If he doesn't know the answer to that, then I don't think this pamphlet's going to take it any further as far as he's concerned. And if he does know, then he may be able to give you the kind of answer that you're looking for. Although you may get the kinds of answer you're not looking for, but that's the chance you take if you ask the question. Perhaps I can do that. Major General, you've been following the debate.
Correct, Chairperson.
You're a member of the service for a long time, with extensive experience. Are you aware of any safety considerations which members of the force are urged to comply with when stun grenades are used?
Generally njengapolisa elinamava ingaba mhlambe ukhona imiyalelo elumkisayo uba xa kuzasetshenziswa i-stun grenades kufuneka kwenziwe kanjani?
Correct, Chairperson. It has to be rolled out in a manner that when it explodes, it's not going to cause any hearing problems to the participants or injure them. And it has to be done in a manner that is actually a distance, because when it explodes, it makes a very high noise. And that when when protesters actually respond, they respond in a manner that they get disorientated. It is almost similar like the bulletproof, which when you roll out, and you cannot roll it out in such a manner that it has to be rolled out in 20 meters away from them, and it should not be done in a manner that it can ricochet. Chairperson, there is also another side of it which it has to be considered, is that in the case of self-defense, these safety procedures normally, under any other circumstances or situations, they are not complied with, and members will say, I did it in self or private defense.
If you've got, all you've got to defend yourself with is a stun grenade, and someone is coming to kill you, you can throw the stun grenade at him in order to defend yourself. And the ordinary rules don't apply because you're acting to defend yourself or defend a colleague or something. Is that, if I understand correctly?
Correct, Chairperson.
Right. This document now, we don't know the status of the document, but I'm not interested in the status of the document, I'm interested in your knowledge as a Major General and a Deputy Provincial Commissioner. What it says here is don't throw direct to participants. Is that also an instruction, and we're not talking about the self-defense situation now, but is that an instruction also normally given to members of the service? When you're using stun grenades, don't throw them directly to participants. You've got a public protest or something of that kind, you're using stun grenades. Are they told, don't throw the stun grenades directly at the participants? Or don't you know about that?
Chairperson, only what I know is that don't throw it in such a manner that it injured the protesters.
Referred to injury can include injury to the hearing.
Yes,
for the reasons you gave.
That's right.
General uthi indlela ayaziyo yena kusetshenzwa ngayo i-stun grenade kuba uyayiqenga nje kodwa ngohlobo lokuba ayisondeli ebantwini kuba xa igqabhuka inokwazi ukubalimaza indlebe kwaye xa ufuna uyiqengele kudenyana kunabaqhankqalazi abo uyenza njenge-bulletproof uba iba kumithara ezingama-20 ukusuka kulawo bantu uyiphose futhi kwindlela uba ayizubuyela mva ize kuwe kodwa kunendlela ekwenzeka ngayo uba uyiphose ngolunye uhlobo xa mhlawumbe uzikhusela engozini unako ukuyiphosa emntwini ke uba ngaba ubomi bakho busengozini.
Major General, I want you to assume that the stun grenade that you've seen going off in the video is that deployed by Lieutenant Beloy. Assume that that first one we see is the one shot by Lieutenant Beloy.
We can accept that the first one must have been Lieutenant Beloy's one because that's the evidence.
Yes.
You don't have to make an assumption. It seems to be correct.
Okay. And then, Major General, from the video, it is clear that that explodes in the face of those people, whether they are members of SAPS or protesters. The stun grenades explode very close and in the face of those people that we see on the video, whoever they are.
I object, Chair. That video doesn't show that.
In the vicinity of, I'm not sure the Major General can testify as what the permissible or acceptable or recommended distance is. But I'm not sure that, absent that evidence, as to what an impermissible or unacceptable distance would be, that we can say just by looking at the video clip that that distance was exceeded. But I think that's the thrust of Mr. Ngulwana's objection, which sounds prima facie to be right.
Ngokubheka kula video kwaye singenawo nje uba ugeneral unokwazi mhlawumbe umgama ovumelekileyo kwaye umgama ongavumelekanga apho inokulahla khona igreen ungakanani na.
There's another problem. I understand this video was taken from some distance away. It's one of the Lonman videos. And you have sort of parallax problems and problems of perspective. It's sometimes difficult to see what a distance is just by looking at the video clip. So one's got to be careful about the way one frames questions based on what one can see. I'm not stopping you, but I'm seeking to ensure that the questions we get are such that they elicit answers that will help us.
Umhlala ngaphambili enganqanda uMisluru kodwa uyathi uba le video ayithathele umgamanyana so akunokwazi ukuqiniseka ngomgama phakathi wale video okanye umgama phakathi we-grenade nabantu abo.
Major General Mpembe, it appears from the video that, and I'm not getting into a debate about whether what the distance was that was used by Lieutenant Beloy, but it appears from the video that the stun grenades explode very close in the face of those people. And there is no evidence before this commission.
Mr. That's the problem. You see, you're using the word very close, and that's what Mr. Ngulwana, I think, if I may say so correctly, objects to. That if you've got a video taken from a distance, and it's very hard to work out how far the stun grenade exploded from the nearest person just by looking at the video. Maybe when we get some direct evidence on that, you'll be in a stronger position. But you can perhaps put the question less precisely than you have, and see what answer you get. But I don't think I should allow you to say very close, because I'm not sure that's right.
Chair, it might be helpful to my learned friend. My learned friend to my left has just usefully pointed out to me that perhaps the person to put this question to would have been Lieutenant Baloyi, who would have been closer to the action, not this witness. You might want to
yes,
think
I understand
about
that. She's laying a foundation, as good cross-examiners do sometimes, by asking a preliminary question of a witness of a preliminary, sorry, asking a question of a preliminary witness with a view to dealing with the main witness on the point later. So, but I take the point. The person best able to answer these questions will be, the persons will be Lieutenant Baloyi and one or other of the miners who was present at the time.
Into yomgama phakathi kwabantu awakuphuswa kuyo lo stun grenade umuntu onokuyiphendula kakuhle ngabantu abebekhona apho njengoLieutenant Baloyi okanye abaqhankqalazi kuba yayithathelwe kude ivideo kwaye uGeneral akanokuba nolwazi kuloo ndawo.
Chair, this is not a critical point in the cross-examination. I'm going to move on, and I'll take it up with other witnesses.
We've got some useful information on record which will help you with subsequent witnesses, but I think you've exhausted this point for the moment. You extracted as much as you can, and you're wisely moving on to the next one.
Major General, what actions have been taken to investigate or discipline the SAPS members who fired tear gas and or stun grenades without authority?
General ingaba ngaphi amagqatso athathwayo mhlawumbe ukulungisa izigwegwe zawo malunga amapolisa aye adubula ngezintswizisi enganikwanga myalezo ukwenza njalo.
Chairperson, firstly is that with regard to Warrant Officer Kuhn, he said that he had an instruction even though he doesn't know who gave the order. But currently I don't know what is the status in terms of investigation, but from my point of view, that is that he had that instruction.
Well, that's what he says. But he didn't have instruction from the only person authorized to give the instruction. But I think that point was covered quite extensively before. And I don't think there's anything new. The facts are on record, I think, that the Major General reported the facts as he's given them to us, to the Provincial Commissioner. It doesn't appear as if any steps were taken. That's a matter which can be asked of other witnesses. I don't know he can take it any further. And the material facts, I think, are before the Commission. They may call for further questioning of other witnesses and possibly argument later, but I don't know that this witness can help us any more than he has.
Yes, Chair, and I intend to move on. I just wanted to establish whether the Major General knew of any update on disciplinary steps that had been taken against members.
He says he doesn't.
Chair, turning now to precisely that, Major General, what you told the Provincial Commissioner. And to recap the evidence as I understand it, if you could just confirm it for me, you briefed the National Commissioner and the Provincial Commissioner and General Annandale about this incident on the 13th, correct?
General uba nikhumbula kahle uye waxelela umkomisha welizwe ngokubanzi waxelela umkomisha ophondo kwaye no General Annandale ngezenzakalo zangalo mina.
Correct, Chairperson, in different times.
Emhlala ngaphambili ngamaxesha ahlukeneyo.
And focusing specifically on what you told the Provincial Commissioner now, what did you tell her about the use of stun grenades and tear gas on the 13th? Specifically, stun grenades and tear gas. What did you tell the Provincial Commissioner about their use on the 13th?
Xa sibheka kwinto ayixelela Commissioner wophondo ingabe wamxelela ntoni ngokusetshenziswa kwe-stun grenade ne-tear gas ngalo mhla we-13?
Chairperson, I did testify that I informed the Provincial Commissioner about the incident on that day, meaning that by that time I did tell her that there was the utilization of the tear gas and that there is a utilization of the stun grenades. And at that time, I could not establish whether the stun grenades were utilized under which circumstances.
Ndiyakhumbula ndamxelela umcommissioner wophondo uba ngalo mini kwasetshenziswa i-stun grenade ne-tear gas kodwa ngalo xesha ndamxelela uba andazi uba zazisetshenziswa phansi kweyiphi imeko na.
I informed her telephonically while I was still on the scene.
Ndamtsalela umnxeba ndisekuloo ndawo esehlakalo.
And that there are members who have been killed. The other one was killed already on the scene.
Ndamxelela uba kunamalungu aswelekileyo omnye wayeswelekele kuloo ndawo esehlakalo.
And the other member, I also said that he should be taken to the hospital.
Ilungu ndamxelela uba lifuneka lithatheliswe esibhedlele.
And he later passed on.
Emveni koko waye wasishiya.
And the other one I informed the Provincial Commissioner is that is Lieutenant Baloyi, who's being critically injured, and he's also being airlifted to Fencrest Hospital in Rustenburg.
Kwaye ndamxelela uba omnye walo malungu wayengu-Lieutenant Baloyi owayethathwe ngenqwelomoya ukuywa eFencrest Hospital.
Chairperson, later on that day, it was then discovered that Lieutenant Baloyi utilized the stun grenade as well as Lieutenant Baloyi and Lieutenant Colonel Farlam utilized it, and both of them, they were saying that it was in self-defense.
Kwaye kwavakala futhi emveni kwexesha ngalo mini uba
Saying that Baloyi alleged on the 13th that he fired off his stun grenade in self-defense.
Not on the 13th, Chairperson, but I said later.
Subsequently.
Subsequently, Lieutenant Baloyi, it was subsequently.
Subsequently, he alleged that he fired it in self-defense.
Yes, when his statement was taken, but
Yes,
Lieutenant Colonel Farlam
Yes.
on the 13th.
Yes, I see. Thank you.
Yes.
uLieutenant Baloyi wathi uba ubisebenzise emveni kwexesha i-stun grenade eso ezikhusela no-Lieutenant Colonel Farlam naye wayisebenzisa ngomhla we-13.
Major General, just some follow-up questions on that testimony as to what you told the Provincial Commissioner. So, and if you can just tell me if I understand your testimony correctly, you told, with respect to Lieutenant Baloyi using a stun grenade, you told the Provincial Commissioner on the 13th that Lieutenant Baloyi used a stun grenade, but you didn't tell her because you didn't yet know that he said he did it in self-defense, correct?
Uba ndikuveka kuhle General uthi waxelela umcommissioner wophondo uba uLieutenant Baloyi usebenzise i-stun grenade ngalo mhla nge-13 kodwa azange umxelele uba wayisebenza ekhusela ubomi bakhe.
Not correct, Chairperson.
Akunjalo mhlalo ngaphambili.
What did you tell the Provincial Commissioner on the 13th about Lieutenant Baloyi using his stun grenade in self-defense?
Wamxelelana umcommissioner wophondo ngomhla we-13 ngokusebenza kwakhe i-stun grenade.
Nothing, Chairperson.
Azange nimxelele nto.
Major General, could you clarify your answer? When you say nothing, what did you tell the Provincial Commissioner about Lieutenant Baloyi and his use of stun grenades on the 13th?
Xa utamxelelanga nakho cacise General wamxelelana umcommissioner wophondo ngokusebenzisa kwa-Lieutenant Baloyi i-stun grenade ngomhla we-13.
Chairperson, even following your questioning, I said specifically with regard to Lieutenant Baloyi, it was subsequently later on, not on the 13th.
Njengoba ndiphendula umbuzo kamhlala ngaphambili ndithile uba ekuhambeni kwexesha hayi ngomhla we-13 kulapho ndamcela khona umkomishana wephondo ngokusebenzisa kwamnumzana Baloyi isithuziso.
With regard to the utilization of the stun grenade, but with regard to Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak, it was
General
on the
Mpembe,
13th.
can we not move on to Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak? Just staying with Lieutenant Baloy. I want to understand your evidence because the detail is important. Are you saying that on the 16th, you told on the 13th, you told the Provincial Commissioner nothing about Lieutenant Baloy using a stun grenade?
I understand him to say that, but perhaps, you did interrupt him while he was giving his evidence. Perhaps you give him a chance to finish his answer, and then you can ask your question. But did I understand you correctly to say you did tell her, you spoke to her on the telephone initially, she then came to Marikana, and you saw her again, and you also saw General Annandale and the National Commissioner. But you said you saw them separately. When you spoke to the Provincial Commissioner at Marikana, I thought I heard you say that you did tell her that Baloy had fired a stun grenade, but you didn't mention that he allegedly did so in circumstances of self-defense, because you only heard that later. Is that an accurate summary of what you say?
Uba ngaba ndikuvika kuhle General uthe waye wamfonela uqala umkomishana wephondo waphinde wambona futhi eMarikana wamcelela uba uLieutenant Baloyi uyisebenzile i-stun grenade kodwa awujonga uba usebenzise ekhusela ubomi bakhe kuba wawungazi ngalomzuzu uba wayikhusela ubomi bakhe.
Chairperson, when I informed the Provincial Commissioner, by that time on the 13th, I did not know that Lieutenant Baloyi used it. I said subsequently later on.
I misunderstood.
But I knew of Colonel Vermaak.
Yes. You knew, of course, I take it, or am I wrong? Did you know that a stun grenade had been used by a member on the ground? But you didn't know who was. Right. And Baloyi, of course, had gone by this time. He was in Ferncliff's hospital. So you only heard subsequently that he was the member on the ground who fired the stun grenade, and that he said he did so in circumstances of self-defense. Is that correct? That's what you knew, only subsequently.
Subsequently, yes, Chairperson, but not on the 13th.
Yes, you understand. You did know that Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak had used stun grenades from the air, from the helicopter, on the 13th.
Correct, Chairperson.
Oh, with the uGeneral ebesazi uba ebengazi uba ebesazi uba i-stun grenade isetyenziwe ngomhla we-13 kodwa engazi uba ngeliphi ilungu ezilisebenzisileyo. Enye into ebeyazi yena uba uLieutenant Colonel Vermaak nguye wayisebenzisa isintwizisi ukusuka kwinqwelomoya.
And Major General, you advised the Provincial Commissioner on the 13th that a stun grenade had been used by a member on the ground. You didn't yet know who it was or in what circumstances. And you also advised her that Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak had used 2 stun grenades that he threw from the helicopter on the 13th, correct?
General umazisile umkomishana wephondo uba i-stun grenade isetyenziwe kodwa ubungazi uba isetyenziwe ngubani kwaye umazisile uba uLieutenant Colonel Vermaak nguye osebenzise izintwizisi ezibini ukusuka kwinqwelomoya. Ingaba kunjani?
No, Chairperson. On the ground, I did not know on the 13th. I knew subsequently later, but I knew of Colonel Vermaak.
That's your evidence incorrectly. I said, I understood you say, but I may have misunderstood you. I'm not putting anything to you. That you knew that a stun grenade had been used on the ground, and that also stun grenades had been used from the air, from the helicopter. Is that wrong? Did you say you knew about Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak's stun grenades from the helicopter? Did you not know at the time that a stun grenade had, before Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak threw his stun grenades, that a stun grenade had been used on the ground? Did you not know that at all on the 13th?
Correct, Chairperson.
Njengoba ebuza umhlali ngaphambili ephendula uGeneral uthi ngalomhla we-13 wayengazi uba kukhona ilungu ebeliphansi elasebenzisa i-stun grenade. Into ebeyazi ngeyokuba umnumzana uVermaak nguye wasebenzisa izintwizisi ezibini ngomhla we-13.
Major General, did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that stun grenades were used before the attack on SAP's members?
Generally ngaba umazisile uMcommissioner Opondo uba ama-stun grenade ayasetshenziswa phambi kokuba kuhlaselwe amalungu amapolisa.
No, Chairperson.
Hayi mhlala ngaphambili.
Take it you knew that a tear gas canister had been fired before the attacks on SABC members. In fact, you described it earlier in your evidence as being the spark that caused the problem. You remember that was the evidence you gave. You obviously knew that. Did you tell that to the commissioner, provincial commissioner?
Ndithemba ubusazi uba i-tear gas yona yayisetshenziswe ngoba nawe wawutshile kubungqina bakho uba yiyo mhlambi eyenza uba kuqale olo hlaselwano. Ingabe wamxelela uMcommissioner Opondo uba sasetshenziswa i-tear gas?
Chairperson, I told her about the tear gas, which is a spark, but not the hand grenade. The stun grenade, yes.
Ndamxelela uMcommissioner Opondo nge-tear gas uba kuyiyo eyaqala lo ngxuba kaxaka kodwa azange ndithethe nge-stun grenade.
Major General, did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that tear gas and stun grenades had been used without authority?
Generally ngaba wamxela uMcommissioner Opondo uba i-tear gas ne-stun grenades asetshenziswa ngaphandle komyalelo.
Before you answer the question, I don't think that the question is correctly phrased as far as relates to stun grenades. Remember, the evidence of the witness was that a member can use stun grenades, or presumably even tear gas, in circumstances of self-defense without instruction. So they would have implied authority from the common law relating to self and private defense to use a stun grenade, even without an instruction, if it was necessary for the purpose of defense. So
Thank you, Chair. Let me reformulate.
Evidence of the Colonel is that what he saw going on the ground with people being attacked, and that's why he threw the stun grenade. So he would, if his evidence is correct, be entitled to say, I acted in private defense, and I didn't need instructions from anybody. The tear gas is in a different category. And perhaps I could, if you forgive me, I'll phrase the question. You told us that you didn't give an instruction that the tear gas be thrown, and there's a debate as to whether there was an instruction and if it was authorized. But we won't go there. The question is, did you tell the provincial commissioner, as you've told us, and as you told the people at Rustenburg, that you never gave an instruction to that effect? Did you tell her that?
Ingaba general umxelele uMcommissioner Opondo uba azange umnike umyalelo uba i-tear gas isetshenziswe ngalo mina.
Yes, Chairperson, that I did not give the instruction.
Yes, thank you.
Ewe ndamxelela mhlala ngaphambili.
Major General, did you tell the Provincial Commissioner of the threats to your life on the 13th?
General ngabe wamxelela uMcommissioner Opondo ngokuhohisa kubomi bakho ngomhla we-13?
Chairperson, as I testified yesterday, I said that I spoke with the Provincial Commissioner about that threat at the JOC when she has arrived. And I told her the circumstances of that threat and how do I feel about the threat itself, as I have explained yesterday. To say, in the first place, Lieutenant Colonel Farlam informed me I did not see any imminent threat. Chairperson, I went on to say I did not know even who was the attacker. And secondly, Colonel Farlam requested me in a manner that I should enter into a Nyala as quick as possible. And I indicated to him that...
You did tell us all that yesterday.
Yes.
I think Council is interested in a narrower point than that. He simply wants to know, did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that you'd been told in turn by Lieutenant Colonel Farlam that there had been threats to kill you, as a result of which you were removed from the scene? That's a question. And I think you've answered that by saying, yes, you did tell her. And you said so yesterday also.
Thank you, Chair. Major General, did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that until the tear gas and later stun grenades were used, that the group, while armed, was moving peacefully towards the copy? Did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that they were just walking and you were escorting them to the copy?
General ngabe wamxelela uMcommissioner Opondo uba iqela labantu babehamba ngoxolo besiya ngasendulini leyo ngaphambi kokuba i-tear gas kunye ne-stun grenade emvana kwexesha zidutyulwe.
Chair, I object to an aspect of that question. My learned friend cannot give evidence from the bar as regards the peacefulness of the march. She can't say, did you ask her, did you tell the provincial commissioner that the people were marching peacefully? It's not for her to decide. It's not for her to decide whether they were marching peacefully or not.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but asking a leading question, which is permissible in cross-examination, doesn't amount to giving evidence. There's nothing wrong with asking, did you say this? And by stating, or including in the question what the person is asked about, what was said, doesn't amount to evidence that what was said was correct. So I think with respect, that's not a good point. So carry on, Mr. Lew.
Thank you, Chair. Major General, did you tell the Provincial Commissioner, using your words, that the tear gas was the spark of the attack?
Generally ngaba wamxelela umcommissioner uphondo usebenzisa ngokwamazwi wakho uba i-tear gas yiyo eyaqala lo mbambano.
I said to the provincial commissioner that the group that was being escorted by us, the protesters, I saw them turning into the informal settlement. And I said to her that, keeping on with my earlier briefing, I thought that the member was complying with what I've said because I briefed the commanders about that. To say that we should make sure that the protesters do not enter into the informal settlement.
Ndamxelela umcommissioner wophondo uba eleqela sasilikhaphayo latshintsha indlela laya kuloo ndawo ihlala inamatyotyombe. Imlungu lelo polisa mhlambi ngokuya ngokwengcelo endandibanike yona yoba singabavumeli nakanjani na uba bayongena kuloo ndawo lalilandela loo mneyalelo.
But not that they were marching peacefully. And then later on it was discovered that the member who fired the gas, the tear gas, is Warrant Officer Kun, and he did not know who gave the order.
Kodwa anditsho uba babehamba ngoxolo kwaye kwafumaneka emveni kwexesha uba Warrant Officer Kun nguye owadubulayo kuba esithi ufumene umyalelo nangona engazi bo umyalelo wawusuka kweliphi icala.
Major General, my question is a very limited one. Did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that the tear gas was, as you've described it, your own words, the spark for the attack? Did you tell that to the Provincial Commissioner?
Chair, I take it this is the version of the Human Rights Commissioner that they're going to call a witness to testify to this version.
Chair, it was Major General Mpembe's own testimony.
I asked him long ago, you remember, whether the tear gas was, I used the Afrikaans word funk, and then said the spark that caused the attack, and he said yes. So the question is based upon the answer that he gave earlier. So I don't think the objections were substance. Carry on, Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Chair. So, Major General, my question again. Did you tell the Provincial Commissioner that the tear gas was the spark for the attack?
Generally ngaba wamxelela umcommissioner uphondo uba ngaba i-tear gas kwakuyintsusa yalo mbambano.
Chairperson, as I said, the tear gas was a spark after they turned into the informal settlement, and this is what I said. And when the tear gas was used is when the attack then started to happen. But, and I did also indicate to this commission to say that I thought that the member who utilized the tear gas could have been briefed by his commander with my earlier briefing. That's what I told the provincial commissioner.
Ndamxelela umcommissioner uphondo uba i-tear gas leyo kwaba intsusa emveni kokuba abaqhankqalazi awo bejike indlela baya kwelicala langasekuhlaleni kwabantu kwaye ilunga elo lisebenzisileyo mhlawumbi lalisahamba ngomyalelo elalufumene kukomanda walo njengoba mna njengomkomanda ophethe bonke abokomanda ndandinike umyalelo uba bangavumeli abaqhankqalazi bayongena kuloo ndawo enamatyotyombe.
Now, Major General, all of the questions I've asked you related to what you told the Provincial Commissioner on the 13th. Between the 13th and the 16th, did you brief the Provincial Commissioner again about the events on the 13th?
General, umbuzo wami ngifuna ukubuza uba usuka ngomhla we-13 uya nge-15 waphinde wathethana nomcommissioner wephondo umazisa ngeziganeko ezenzeka usuka nge-15 uya nge-16.
Chairperson, maybe I need the clarity. Is it with regard to specifically the incident of the 13 or with all what was happening at Marikana by then?
I think the question is only confined, Mr. Leroux will perhaps tell us if I'm wrong. All she wants to know, I think, is after your conversation with the Provincial Commissioner on the 13th, when you told her what had happened earlier that day at Marikana, do you subsequently, between that conversation and the 16th, speak to her again about what had happened on the 13th? I think if that's the question, is it, Mr. Leroux?
Yes, Chair.
Umbuzo abafuna ukuqonda General ukuba emva kwesiganeko sange-13 ukuya phaa kwi-16 waye waphinda na wathetha nomcommissioner wephondo umchazela okanye umazisa ngekunto eyenzekela ngomhla we-13 ku-Agasti.
Chairperson, what I was telling the Provincial Commissioner, it was to take what happened on the 13th and to build it on to the 16th. But not that I was briefing to her to say, to avoid what could have happened on the 16th, now this is what we are.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I understand the position is that she went back to Rustenburg. I take it her office is in Rustenburg, is it? The headquarters?
No, in Potchefstroom.
In Potchefstroom, I see. So she went back to, she came to Marikana on the 13th after the incident that you described. And you spoke to her and told her what happened, as you told us. The National Commissioner came as well, and General Annandale came as well. She then, the Provincial Commissioner, I take it, then went back to Potchefstroom, did she?
Correct, Chairperson, almost in the early hours of the 14th.
Yes. And did you have occasion to speak to her at all on the 14th?
Correct, Chairperson.
Did you? Did you speak to her on the 14th?
I did speak to her, but not specifically, not only on the 13th issue, but also with what is taking place at Marikana.
Did you repeat the account that you'd given of what had happened on the 13th? You know, you told her what had happened on the 13th, what you'd seen and so on. Did you repeat that on the 14th to her?
No, Chairperson,
No.
not to repeat, but to say what we are doing in terms of the plan.
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
And then that's the 14th. The evidence, I think, is that on the 15th, she was at a meeting in Midrand. So did you speak, and I think the evidence also is that, did you speak to her that evening after you'd spoken to Mr. Matunzwa?
Correct, Chairperson.
Did you speak to her all that day before you spoke to her in the evening and told her what Mr. Matunzwa had said?
Correct, Chairperson.
Did you speak to her during the day? You say correct, I'm not sure if you mean that. During the course of the 15th, she was at a meeting in Midrand, and you were, I take it, attending to various things at Marikana. Did you speak to her at all? I know you spoke to her in the evening and reported to her what Mr. Matunzwa had said, but apart from that, did you speak to her at all on the 15th?
The last time that I spoke to her, it was after I gave her the feedback of what Mr. Matunzwa said.
Yes. I see. And during that, the day before you gave her that feedback, did you speak to her at all?
Earlier on, I speak to her that the unions have agreed to go to the meeting, and after the meeting, I gave her the feedback.
Yes,
in
I
terms
understand.
of
I
the,
understand.
yes, Chairperson.
But I think what Mr. Leroux wants to know is, did you speak to her again on the 15th about what had happened on the 13th? It doesn't sound it was necessary for you to do so.
No, Chairperson, I didn't on the 15th.
No.
I only spoke to her only on the 14th to tell her in terms of what we built on from what has happened on Monday.
Yeah, no, I see.
Ugeneral
Thank you,
uyavuma wathetha nomcommissioner wephondo kodwa wayengathethanga ebhekiselele ngqo kula mhla we-13 wayethetha ngeziganeko sezizonke ukusuka kumhla we-13 ukuya phambili phaya kumhla we-16.
Major General, when you spoke to the Provincial Commissioner, as you've just testified, on the 14th and the 15th, did you tell her that you had established that the tear gas had been used without authority?
General xa wawuthetha naye umcommissioner wephondo ngezintsuku zibalwayo wawuye wamxelela na uba usewufumanisile uba i-tear gas yasetyenziswa ngaphandle komyalelo wakho?
Chairperson, I told her that according to Warrant Officer Kuhn is that he had an instruction even though he did not see the command. He did not see the person who gave the command.
Ndamxelela uba ngokuya ngokwa-warrant officer Khuni wafumana umyalelo uba ayisebenzise kodwa engazi uba wayefumene kuyiphi na ikomando.
And when you
The Commission resumes. Major General, you're still under oath. Mr.
Sifungo General.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, in the interests of progressing the cross-examination, I've asked my instructing attorney to hand out a summary of analysing the statements that have been provided to the Commission and that are listed on the index of documents at item 30. This is the collection of statements of members that were present on the 13th, and we've done the analysis as to when they failed to mention tear gas. The document that's being handed out just lists the statements and records that 17 of the 28 make no mention of the use of tear gas and stun grenades before the attack on police. Chair,
Yes, I see. Sorry.
so I don't want to go statement by statement because
No,
Major
no,
General...
thank you for the document. Before you proceed, I said I would give the ruling on the point that stood over from yesterday in relation to the question that was asked about the criticism which Mr. White makes in relation to the preparation of the plan and the briefing of the members. I've discussed it with my colleagues, and we've come to the conclusion we think the fair way of dealing with it is follows, that you should obtain a statement from Mr. White of his views on the matter, have it reduced to writing, make it available, his views on the matter and the reasons. In other words, this will form part of the final statement to be produced in due course. Make it available to the witness, so that he will, and then we will then, I will then allow the question to be put, his views, his reaction to what Mr. White says. But I think at the moment, in fairness to the witness, he is entitled to get what he would have got if the final statement were ready to hand. I know why the final statement isn't to hand. I'm not being critical about that. But as far as this question is concerned, that seems to us to be the fairest way forward. What Mr. White says and his reasons, so the witness can then have an opportunity to deal with it. Yes. And in particular, perhaps there's a further rider to that, or elaboration to that, which Advocate Hemraj will now state.
I think your question related to whether the commanders or the commanders did not draw up their own plan. So I think whichever Mr. White's views are on that, in particular, need to be put to the witness and then let him comment so that it's an informed view.
Understood.
If you can't get that ready by the time he has finished his evidence, I'm afraid we may have to get him back just for that point. But I would urge upon you that you should try to do it while he's still with us, even if he's being cross-examined by somebody else, or if you want to pursue the point. But I think, in fairness to him, he's entitled to that.
Isigqibo ngalanto yayizolo kaMnumzana uWhite kuthiwa unkosazana Leroux akafumane istatements zayo uMnumzana uWhite imibono yakhe nezizathu zalo mibono izigxeko ebenazo kumakomanda kuba ebengenawo icebo elingelawo lokwenza umsebenzi lowo. Emveni koko ke kulapho bangakwazi ukubuza ingqina leli uba ilona lingaphendula lithini na kulonto injalo.
Mr. Leroux, must this document be given an exhibit number, or is it just a guideline for use in cross-examination? I suppose it should be an exhibit, because when we read the record later, or other people read it after us, your cross-examination on this point will more easily be understood if this document is part of the record.
Yes, Chair, I think for document management purposes, let's give it an exhibit number.
Chair, I'm not going to object to it being made an exhibit number. I just want to add one rider. The chairperson has, of course, provided the rider to say this should take into account that there are supplementary statements that are going to be made in this regard. And secondly...
I'm sorry, I'm dealing with something different now. I'm not stopping you. I take it that you're referring to the ruling I made. What Mr. Leroux and I are now dealing with is whether this document should be given exhibit number. I take it you don't object to that.
I started off by saying that, Chair.
Are you talking about that?
Yes.
I see. All right. Well, carry on.
Thank you, Chairperson. So to make it clear again, I'm not objecting to this document being made an exhibit, subject to the following. Firstly, we did indicate that the police, it has always been in the contemplation of the police to provide supplementary statements from possibly all or some of these members. I don't know the identity of them yet, people who were involved in the discharge of ammunition at scene 2, at least. Secondly, we still don't know whether these are warning statements or IPID statements, or whether there's anything in substance, something similar to the statement of Lieutenant Colonel Scott, for example. So I think perhaps our learned friend was still to make that clear. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairperson, I don't want to complicate this matter further, but we are more than a year after the event now, almost a year into the life of this commission. I think it's time for the SABC to commit to a deadline in furnishing these statements. They're not much use to us if they arrive after the commission has finished its business. Can I ask the Chairperson to make a ruling that all of these statements must be made available by 15 September? They've had more than enough time to do that.
Perhaps our learned friend wasn't here when this issue was dealt with. Maybe he wasn't listening attentively. I did say that Mr. Semenya is attending to this. For me to commit him in his absence would be unfair.
Mr. Chesterton, I think whether you were listening attentively or not is neither here nor there. Although that kind of clap given by one councillor to another is not acceptable. It seems fair that we should get Mr. Semenya here before we fix a deadline. So I will consider your application, and when Mr. Semenya is here, we'll get his views on it. He may well accept that that's an appropriate date, and I'm sure he will appreciate the desirability of getting the statements before the Commission concludes its work.
I should also put on record that if these statements finally emerge, it may be necessary to recall some witnesses for further cross-examination in the light of what these statements say, because we can only cross-examine witnesses on what we have before us. And it's very undesirable for statements of material eyewitnesses to arrive a year into the proceedings.
Chair, for the record, the Human Rights Commission supports the evidence leader's application for a firm deadline on the provision of supplementary statements, obviously in consultation with Mr. Semenya. And again, for the record, the Human Rights Commission will undertake the analysis of statements requested by the Chair, but of course the utility of statements that arrive more than a year after the events in question, and clearly after lengthy cross-examination on some material issues, the Human Rights Commission is more likely to content itself with the more contemporaneous statements, because those are likely to be accorded greater weight by the Commission. But in any event, to return to Exhibit HHH 41, if I could just, again, for the record and for the evidence leaders, note a statement that appears on the second page, which is that by Makubela.
Chair, before my learned friend continues, I'm reminded that the supplementary statements to which I referred relate to, in large measure, scene 2 on the 16th, not on the 13th.
And you see, we haven't had much evidence about scene 2, so to be fair, it doesn't sound as if the kind of problems that people have anticipated will necessarily arise. There has been a dearth of evidential material about what happened on scene 2. That's one of the problems, actually. And hopefully that problem will be addressed by the statements that we've been promised. But obviously a deadline is desirable. It's also, as I've said, not fair to extract a deadline from Mr. Ngwana when Mr. Semenya is involved and he's the leader of their team, and he should have a chance to have an input in relation to the deadline date. So you were saying something about Mr. Makubela. That's 148. This is on page 2 of Exhibit HHH 41.
Yes, Chair, and it's just to make a request of the evidence leaders when they are considering the witness list of witnesses to be called in future, that we ask that Makubela be placed on that list, because the phrasing he uses is difficult to understand. It's recorded there. It says the problem, tear gas was used. We don't know if he we don't know what he means by that. And so I've included him in the list of statements relating to the use of tear gas. We don't know what he means, though. The other statements are clearer. They're either silent or they're clearer on what the member means.
Yes, tear gas was used. He seems to suggest it was a problem, but we don't know what exactly he means. But anyway, he is a witness, or rather a statement maker who says tear gas was used, I say.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't intend to then go through the 28 statements. They have been provided to the Commission and to the witness, of course. But the critical point is that the vast majority of these statements are silent on the use of tear gas before the attack. And so, Major General Mpembe, one final question on this line of cross-examination, and it is this. Because the reason that this matters, of course, is that it sets the tone for what happens later in the week. This morning you've testified that you took into account the attack on the 13th and the circumstances of that attack in your planning on the 14th, 15th, and ultimately on the 16th. And so therefore it matters whether you're dealing with a group of protesters who lashed out and killed 2 officers when provoked without warning by tear gas and stun grenades, or whether you're dealing with a group of protesters who just spontaneously murdered 2 police members without any provocation. And so, will you agree with me that the difference between those 2 accounts matters as you plan as to how to deal with the protesters later in the week?
General, umbuzo wami wokugqibela kuya ngolo siganeko sange-13 kuba siso isiseko sokuya ngaphambili kwefela phaa kwi-16. Xa wawusenza ucwaningo lwakho uplana ukuya phambili, waye wabeka engqondweni inoba usebenza ngabantu abazisukela nje beqhankqalaza bagqibela bebulele amapolisa amabini okanye ubuza ngabantu benenjongo zokwenza lona?
Before you answer, Major General, we know from the video that this may be difficult in relation to the stun grenades, although from the police presentation, Exhibit L, slide 47, I think we know what happened in relation to the stun grenades as well, as far as the police case is concerned. But we know from the video that the attack by the strikers only happened after the tear gas. That we can see with our own eyes, and I take it that's your evidence. That is your evidence. Yeah, you've very candidly admitted that. Now, I assume, I hope correctly, that insofar as you were involved in the plan, commenting on the plan, making inputs in relation to the plan, you bore in mind what you had seen happen on the 13th. Am I correct in that assumption?
Correct, Chairperson.
Before we move on, according to slide 47 of Exhibit L, it appears to have been suggested that the tear gas and the stun grenades, which produced 2 large explosive sounds, were discharged, the first ones, before what is referred to in the 3rd bullet, slide 47, namely the protesters, as they are called, turning around and charging at the members behind them. So it seems, am I correct in thinking, that the police version is that the strikers turned around and charged the members behind them, which was effectively the onset of the attack, after the tear gas had been used by Warren of the Kin, and at least the stun grenade, which was discharged by Lieutenant Beloy, at least those 2 things had happened before what is described in the 3rd bullet, slide 47, took place. Is that correct?
Njengoba kuchazwa ke lapha ku slide 47 okutshintsha kwabantu baqale bahlasela amapolisa ngohlobo ebesiyibona ngani nasevidweni, into eyenzeke emva koba tear gas ne-stun grenade sabe sesidutyuliwe, ingaba kunjalo?
Chairperson will recall that those that were there, we were thinking that the turning of the protesters and the use of the tear gas sparked there.
Anyway, the point is you took what you had seen happen.
Yes,
at,
Chairperson.
on that field on the 13th, you bore in mind when you participated in discussions at the JOCCOM on the plan.
Correct,
Or the
Chairperson.
plans, I think there was more than one plan actually, but your participation obviously involved what you'd experienced, seen and understood and so on the 13th. That's correct, you said that.
Yes, correct, Chairperson.
ngele xesha beniphaya kwijokho nisenza olwacwaningo ibisezingqondweni zenu into yokuba okwakutshintsha kwabaqhankqalazi besiza behlasela amapolisa nokudutyulwa kwama-tear gas kungaba yiyo intsusa yale mbambano?
It appears the police version is clear from the second bullet of that slide 47.
That's correct or not may be a matter of debate, but we won't spend time on that. But as far as what also is clear is what 3 says, and bullet 3, and the witness agrees with that. So Mr. LaRue, would you like to carry on?
Thank you, Chair. Major General, I'd like us to move now to the events of the 16th.
Singaya phaa kwiziganeko zangomhla we-16.
And Chair, if I could just lead the Major General quickly through some slides and photographs that you've received so that I can position the cross-examination at a new point. Major General, could I ask you to start with slide 148 of Exhibit L?
Singake siphaa kuslide 148 ku-exhibit L, General.
And this is a document that we know from its properties was created at 8:29 a.m. on the morning of the 16th. And then if I could ask you to turn...
I'm sorry, you say that. Of course, I'm not sure the witness knows that to be correct. That is something I take it you say you learned from the properties. So you must have got it from a computer.
Yes, Chair, and it'll be confirmed with when Scott comes to testify as well, because it was his computer.
Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. So that's really a question that to be asked of Lieutenant Colonel Scott, or Colonel Scott as he now is. My point is, this witness doesn't know about that. At least I don't think he does.
Yes, Chair, I'm just identifying the document for the record.
All right, okay.
I'm not asking Major General Mpembe about his knowledge of its properties. So if we could have slide 148 from Exhibit L. And then, Major General, if you could turn up a document that is identified as FAMARC IMGP 4524. This is an aerial photograph taken at 11:22 a.m. on the morning of the 16th of August.
You are in a position of advantage over me, which causes
Chair,
me some concern. We were given a batch of documents, for which we're grateful, but they didn't have the markings to which you refer. So if you want me to extract the document from the bundle, you must give me further and better particulars, and then I take it you want it to be an exhibit, do you? So I'll have to mark it. But firstly, I must find the document.
Yes, Chair. It's the photograph that is now displayed on the screens. It's an aerial photograph taken on the morning of the 16th.
I think I've now succeeded in identifying. Let me hold it up. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
All right. Now, I take it this has got to be an exhibit.
Yes, Chair.
And we'll call it Triple H 42.
Lo mboniso wathathwa ngentsasa yango-M16 sizawunika inamba yangu-Triple H 42.
And then, Major General, if you could have before you a third photograph that has been provided to you. It's item 17 on the index of documents, Chair. This is, it's marked as, it comes from SAP's hard drive, photos, general, dispersion plan, .jpeg. It's a, yes, Chair.
Got what looks like a Google photograph, I think.
Yes, Chair.
And someone has written in pencil dispersion in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yes, Chair.
So that will be Triple H 42, will it?
43.
Ndomboniso sobonang Triple H 43.
Triple H 42 is aerial photograph
Yes.
of what? How do I describe it?
Chair, if I could suggest aerial photograph taken by Famark at 11:22 a.m.
Taken
16
hang on,
August.
Lieutenant Colonel for Mark.
11:22 a.m. 16 August. Again, we'll confirm that with.
11:22 a.m. on 16 August. All right, I've
We
got
can
that.
only confirm that with Lieutenant Colonel Famark.
We'll provisionally call it that. And if we have to revise it later, we will. And the next one is Triple H 40,
43.
Triple H 43, and that's a photograph, a Google photograph. Yes, and how do I describe that further?
Chair, on the SAP's hard drive, it's recorded as dispersion plan.
All right, so I'll call it Google Photograph Dispersion Plan. And I've marked that as well.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Major General Mpembe, you have testified that.
Before you carry on, sorry, Major General, you've got the documents that Council referred to.
Correct,
And you've marked them with the exhibit numbers, so when Council refers you to them, you know which document she's referring to.
The last one is just the exhibit number.
The last one is the so-called dispersion plan. That's Triple H 43. And the previous one, Triple H 42, is the photograph described as an aerial photograph taken by Lieutenant Colonel from Mark at 11:22 a.m. on the 16th of August. So you've got that, have you?
Chairperson, the other one, it's, okay, I could see that is number 25 on the list.
I haven't got those numbers. I just want to make sure that, and I don't know whether that's right, but I just want to make sure that you and the witness are talking about the exhibits that I've marked, so that when we read the record later, or other people later read the record, they will be able to follow the cross-examination and your answers.
Oh, correct, Chairperson.
Chair, if it's of any assistance to the, hopefully not unduly assistance to the Major General, the Triple H 43 is similar to slide 181 in Exhibit L. The only difference, 181, the only difference is the annotations in 181 are not reflected in Triple H3. And of course, 181 has blue arrows that shows the direction of the dispersion, and Triple H3 does not.
So I see, and of course slide 181 also has got sort of legends, as it were, boxes with type in and so on.
Correct.
So, no, it's probably best that he shouldn't be distracted by those. Just concentrate on the exhibit. Thank you. I've made a note of the correspondence between that slide and this exhibit.
Thank you, Chair. And now, Major General, to orientate you, I'm dealing with the issue of the change in the plan where Inyala 6 was moved back, changing the shape of the Inyala line and therefore the barbed wire deployment. So if you could look at H 42, which is the aerial photograph taken by Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak,
I got it, Chairperson.
right, and Inyala 6 that we are talking about is the Inyala that's in the top left-hand corner with its trailer of barbed wire behind it. So as at 11:22 a.m., the Inyala 6 is in the line of Inyalas. It is then moved back. Now, Major General Mpembe, I also understand your testimony to have been that you did not authorize the change in the plan. You said that it was in the operational commander's discretion to do so. Is that an accurate summary of your evidence regarding authorizing this change in the plan?
General, iba ndikhumla kakuhle ubungqina bakho wawuthe azange ugunyazise ukutshintsha kweplan phaya kunyala 6 kwakungamakomanda awo ayelapha esemagxeni kuyo into yoba ukutshintsha.
No, Chairperson.
Hayi mhlala ngaphambili.
Major General, could you then summarize your testimony?
I said that
Chair,
the commanders...
before the witness answers, I don't want to be obstructive, but my learned friend has a knack of inviting this kind of objection. This issue was dealt with extensively by Mr. Madlanga, and I can refer to the transcript. It's day 108, page 11635. It begins at lines 1 and following. Sorry,
Chair,
it's
I
day
pray
109. And he was there dealing with slides 148 and 149.
Chair, I prefaced this introduction, this line of cross-examination by saying I was going to lead Major General Mpembe hopefully quite quickly through the summary of what we've heard already as to the change in the plan. That is where I'm at. There is a new point which relates
You said there's a new point.
to Mr.
Your
White.
point is, in order to get to the new point, you've got to refer in summary form and as briefly as you can to something that's gone before.
Yes, I'm trying to orientate Major
okay.
General Mpembe. We're dealing with the change in the plan. I understand he's given evidence relating to the authorization of the plan that he said it was up to the operational commander's discretion to do so. That's what I'm just trying to get him to confirm. He said I didn't summarize his evidence correctly, so I'm inviting him now to repeat that evidence. But that's what I'm trying to do so that I can get on to new points.
Let's hope it's done very briefly, because I understand the force of what Mr. Luwana says, and I sympathize with the attitude he's adopted. Major General, the summary was put to you by Ms. Leroux of what you'd said on this particular point, and you said you didn't quite agree with it. So can you give us a short one-sentence summary of what you did say?
Chairperson, in my evidence, I said that it was related to the joke, and I was specific even to say Major General Enendale authorized that.
I must confess that was my recollection also.
Into yayithethiwe ngaphambili leyo kwaye nomhlali ngaphambili uvumelana nayo.
Major General, I just want to establish you were aware of the change, though, on the 16th, correct?
General wawusazi ngoguquko olungomhla we-16 ngabe kunjani?
No, Chairperson.
Hayi mhlali ngaphambili.
When did you become aware of the change in the plan that moved Inyala 6 back?
Waze nini ngolutshintsho lokuba unyala 6 uzawutshintshwa?
Chairperson, I did testify that I knew thereafter.
Thereafter is a vague expression. What Mr. Leroux wants to know from you is, when did you become, you obviously became aware of it. The question is, it happened about 11:20, I think, is that right? How soon after 11:20 did you learn about the change and the fact that it had been authorized? Was it on the 16th? I mean, it must have been on the 16th, I take it. So when on the 16th did you learn about it?
Emva kwe-11:20, why was it nini uba itshintshiwe la nyala 6?
Chairperson, I knew late on the 16th when we when Major Annandale was also discussing what was reported to the JOC before the tragedy.
So
But it was on the 16th.
So did you know about it before the tragedy? Or you only learned after the tragedy?
I said, Chairperson, I learned about the changes after the tragedy.
I see, thank you.
Yes.
Uthi general wazi ngotshintsho emva kwesiyeleko eso.
And Major General, just so we're clear, you learnt of it from Major General Annandale in the JOC after the shooting in the late afternoon of the 16th.
That's what he said.
Major General, when you came to know that there had been a change in the plan, and if I could ask you to look at H 43, which is the document that reflects that change. What was what is now Exhibit H 43 explained to you? Were you briefed on how the plan had been changed?
With respect, this was precisely the issue that was covered by Mr. Madlanga with this same witness.
Umbuzo lo ubuzwa nguMiss Leroux.
Mr. Leroux, that's right, isn't it?
Njengoba ngomnumzana Ngalwane wawenziwe ngomnumzana Madlanga.
Mr. Leroux, that's correct, isn't it? It was debated by Mr. Madlanga with the witness.
Yes, Chair.
Now, the question is, if you've got a new point, let's have it. Now, I understand you've got to have a preliminary matter on record so that the new point can be understood. But perhaps you can tell us what the new point is before you... because there is a fear that we're just going to have a repetition of what we've had before.
Chair, in light of Major General Mpembe clarifying now that he only knew of the change after the tragedy, the Human Rights Commission will submit in due course that he should have known of the change as the overall commander, but with respect to Mr. White's point, I'll have to preserve it for a future witness. I won't be able to put it to the Major General in light of this testimony. So I'll move on to the next topic. Major General, staying on the 16th, I'd like to understand I'd like to establish what you saw and knew during the operation on the 16th. And I want to establish your whereabouts at different points that afternoon. So am I correct that you were in the JOC when the barbed wire was first rolled out?
General ngabanyanisile xa nithi wawukwi-JOC ngeli xesha ulicingo oluhlabayo lalutsala okokuqala.
Chairperson, I did test. It was not immediately, and I need just maybe to be referred to my evidence in terms of saying when the barbed wire I was in the JOC. Because as far as I remember what I testified, I said I was busy with many other things, and then while I was still on my way, and then not exactly knowing whether I have flown or not, and then that's when then I head off.
Major General, I think this may help you. According to the evidence, the barbed wire started being uncoiled just after Mr. Matunjwa left the scene, after his second speech or second address to the strikers. And that's covered in really slide 193 of Exhibit L. And the time given is 15:43. According to slide 192, Brigadier Karlitz gave the command to Colonel Makubele to start with the uncoiling of the barbed wire at about 15:40. And we see this in the photograph at slide 193, and we see in the distance the motor car, the vehicle of Mr. Matunja leaving the area. So and that's, as appears from that photograph, that's the time according to Exhibit L is 1543. So that's what's being talked about. So the first question, therefore, is that the council is asking you is, can you remember where you were at that moment when Mr. Matunja was driving away, having just left the scene, and when just after Brigadier Karlitz had given the command to Colonel Makubela to stop the uncoiling of the wire? Were you in the dock at that stage, or were you outside attending to something else at that particular time? Is that your question?
Yes, Chair.
Umbuzo uthi usakhumbula na uba wawuphi ngelaa xesha xa umnumzana Mathunja ebesuka nje kulaa ndawo esehlakalo emva uba umnumzana uKhalitz exela umnumzana uMakhubela uba aqale ukwenza utsala ucingo oluhlabayo ubusakhumbula wawuphi ngelo xesha?
Chairperson, I was not in the jock. I was attending to other matters, and during attending that other matters, that's the time when I also went to the chopper. But I don't remember precisely where I was.
Yeah, well, I don't know that it really matters. I think she wants to know if you were in the dock. So if I'm wrong, she'll correct me. And then, did you go straight from this other place where you were to the helicopter, or did you go back to the dock first?
No, I didn't go back to the jock first, because by the time when I left the jock, I already informed Major Annandale that from where I will be leaving. That's when then I was already walking with Brigadier Chilwani.
Yes. And I think you told us that as you were walking towards the helicopter, you heard on the radio a particular report that had been received, which enables us, by reference to the timeline prepared by the evidence leads, to work out what the time was. What time was that, Mr. Chaskerson, approximately? When he was walking to the helicopter and he heard that report about TRT members being attacked.
Bear with me for a moment, Chair. In fact, we don't have we don't have an accurate timeline on the radio transcript. We can give you an accurate timeline on when it was happening.
All right, well, that's the same thing. What time's that? Presumably roughly the same time. I thought 1540 actually. I think it's 1540. I think it happened by 15. I think so. But and then it can't be.
It's approximately, we would put it probably around about 1553.
Yeah. All right. So, round about 1553, you were walking towards the helicopter. You heard something on the radio. You then got in the helicopter, and the helicopter went up in the air, ascended. Is that right?
Make it 1554, Chair, because I'd forgotten what the precise. I've just seen my note.
All right. We'll settle for 1554 for the moment. How long roughly were you in the helicopter for? Can you remember, or can you tell us, or perhaps Mr. Jaskis can tell us, when the helicopter came back and you went back to the dock?
That we can tell you exactly, but I understand that the Human Rights Commission has that at their fingertips, and that's part of the cross-examination.
That's all right. Well, let me not then interfere. I was trying to shorten proceedings and get us in to the anticipated point of arrival, as it were, fairly quickly.
Major General Mpembe, I will undertake an exercise using the video footage that we have from the helicopters to try to establish with more precision this timing question. But if I could just return to your testimony a moment ago that you were attending to other matters and then went to the helicopter, you didn't return to the jock first. And you've said you don't remember where you were before you went to the chopper. Is that your...
No. I don't remember you saying that. He just didn't say, and it may be something that it wouldn't be appropriate to ask him about, so I left it.
Major General Mpembe, to the best of your recollection, what were your movements when you left the jock for the last time before you got in the helicopter? Whereabouts were you? And when in your witness statement at paragraph 48, you say that you were told by Annandale that all the other SAPS helicopters were already deployed and in the air. Let me start with that. When were you told that there were no SAPS helicopters available for you and that you would have to use the Protea Coin helicopter? When were you told that?
Generally ngaba ucelwe nini uba inqwelomoya zonke zamapolisa zaseziphezulu emoyeni kwakufanele ba usebenzise inqwelomoya yeProtea Coin. Ungaba ucelwe nini ngalonto?
Chairperson, I did testify that it was when I wanted to go and fly and see.
You told us that you weren't in the dock at the moment. You phoned General Annandale and told him that. And I take it he then arranged for the Protea Coin helicopter to be available for your use. Am I understanding correctly?
That's correct, Chairperson.
And did that happen quite quickly, or did you speak to General Annandale at some time before you went to the helicopter, or was it all done fairly quickly?
Chairperson, when I was in the jock, when I spoke to him to say, I will attend to this matter and then I will fly, then that's when he advised me that the choppers are now deployed, but he has a chopper of coin which can assist. And at that time, he arranged the chopper already.
I understood you to say you telephoned him. Was the conversation you now just told us about, was that a telephonic conversation, or did it take place in the jock with you and the Major General Annandale close to each other?
Close to each other before I leave.
Uthi wayewaziswa nguGeneral Annandale uba akukho inqwelomoya ekhona kodwa wasemlungiselele eProtea Coin ba imthathe. Lo nto ethathethwana babenza bebo babini phaya kwijoko.
And Major General, how long did it take you from when you finished your conversation regarding the availability of helicopters to when you actually got into the helicopter? How long did it take you from when you left the jock to when you got to the helicopter?
Ingaba General uthatha ixesha elingakanani emva kwalonto ethathethwana uba kulungiswe inqwelomoya yecoin ukusuka ejok ukuyofika lapho kwinqwelomoya?
Chairperson, I don't remember because we don't normally write in the pocket our diary because we were busy with very serious matters.
Andinokwazi mhlawumbe ngaphambili ngoba asicelanga uba sibhale kuma diary wethu kuba sasibhizi ngoxanduva apho.
Major General, I understand you may not have a diary entry that assists you, but are we talking about less than 10 minutes, more than 10 minutes from when you leave the jock to when you get into the helicopter?
Ndiyayiqonda lo no General ba ungenze ba uyibhalanga udiary yakho kodwa uqikelele mhlawumbe imizuzu engaphansi kweshumi okanye phansi imizuzu emishumi elihlanu kanjalo nje.
No, Chairperson, I don't remember very well, but I think taking into account the time when I flew, and then we check back what then one can estimate precisely.
What's your estimate?
I just wanted to check, according to my previous evidence, when I testified to the commission, the time was checked approximately when did I flew. And I think I can check it from there.
Have you got that at your fingertips?
The helicopter flight ends at 17:45. It starts sometime before the video starts, and the video starts at 15:57:30.
Earlier, you thought the helicopter left at about 15:54, I think.
No, that was the time of the report that the general received. It would have taken some time for the helicopter to get going after that report.
He heard that report according to his evidence as he was walking towards the helicopter. So the helicopter must have left sometime after 11:54, presumably not very long after.
Yes.
Chair, if I could take the Commission, to the video now, because we've done an analysis of both the Nell video and the Protea Coin video, and then used the evidence leader's time presentation to try to isolate when the different helicopters take off. So if I could now go to that video analysis.
You understand we're on a different exercise, and that is the witness wants to know, is trying to estimate the answer to the question you asked him before, namely the time lapse between his leaving the jock and his getting into the helicopter. And he says he'd like to know what, he can't remember precisely what he said, you can understand that, before, about when the helicopter left. Now, it seems that must have been around about 15:55.
Well, we have a shot of the helicopter on the ground at 15:54:37. That's the last 15:54:37. That's the last.
I see if one refers to Exhibit L, that statement by Captain Adreo to the video operators that they'd been identified as police spies, which led to their leaving the Kopi, that is stated as having happened at 13:25. So it looks as if that's correct, as if the statement in para 12 effectively refers to shortly after 13:25. So what Ms. Senior is saying is we then went back to the jock that's just after 13:25. The shooting started. We heard this because we were listening to the radio at the jock. Now that obviously involves a big time lapse, because if he went back to the jock just after 13:25 and the shooting only started sometime just before 4 o'clock, he can't say he heard any shooting at that stage. So this statement, taken out of context, is very misleading.
Sorry, Mr. Chairperson, I wonder if I might interject there. I have a real concern about the Commission treating Exhibit L as evidence. It wasn't presented as evidence, and there are major flaws, particularly in the times in Exhibit L, which will be dealt with in cross-examination of Colonel Scott. And I want to emphasize that Exhibit L should not be treated as evidence. It was expressly allowed in on the basis that it was not evidence.
I take your cautionary note, but it's not relevant to the point I'm making.
With respect, Chairman, it is, Chairperson, because you're putting a time gap between the radio and what Exhibit L says the time is when the cameraman left the Kopi. My concern is that that time might be completely unreliable and isn't evidence and shouldn't.
I understand. But the point I was trying to make was that whether it appears that the departure of the video operators from the Kopi and their going to the jock took place a considerable amount of time before the shooting started. That's the point I was making. So they would have got back to the jock. Various things happened. The shooting, as we know, only started shortly before 4 o'clock. I don't think we can accept that they got back to the jock just before 4 o'clock.
Well, that again will depend on further evidence. Earlier in the cross-examination of Major General Mpembe, I intervened to point out that the evidence will be that the command to go back to the jock, or the instruction to go back to the jock, didn't come from Captain Adriaa. Captain Adriaa conveyed a message to, we think, Brigadier Carlett, who in turn conveyed the message to Colonel Mere, who in turn, in due course, instructed the members to go back to the jock. They may or may not have gone back to the jock shortly before 4 o'clock. At this stage, we don't know.
Let me try to solve the problem before Advocate Hemraj asks her question. Did you see the videographers back at the jock at some stage in the course of the afternoon?
No, Chairperson.
So you can't help us.
General,
what time they came.
video.
Ms. Leroux, your question is that there is an officer who says he was in the jock and he heard the shooting over the radio.
Correct, Commissioner.
Yes. And what follows upon that? I didn't quite catch the question after that to the witness.
Commissioner, I then intend to move to the next statement of the next officer who says he heard about the shooting on the radio that Major General Mpembe had access to on that channel. That's where I'm going.
All right.
So there are a series of statements of other members who report radio communication relating to the shooting. I'm trying to establish that Major General Mpembe, if indeed he had his handheld radio with him, would have been in a position to know about the shooting.
Major General, you understand the point being put to you. A number of people say that they heard about the shooting on the radio, including Messina, whose statement we've just looked at. What time he got to the dock is neither here nor there. The point that is relevant is that he says the shooting started, he heard about it on the radio. And you said you had access to a radio, handheld radio, and you therefore heard what the people in the dock were hearing on their radio. That's the basis upon which these questions are being asked. And I think she's going to put a series of other statements of other people who spoke about the shooting and what they heard on the radio. Is that correct? Yes, Chair. So perhaps you should put them all to him, and then he can comment.
Let me do that, Chair.
Yes, Chair, but before he does that, the time is very important, of course, because my learned friend started off by talking about when he went to the chopper, which is around 4 in the afternoon. I'm just stating broadly. This doesn't suggest that it happened around 4 at all, regardless of what Exhibit L says. The sequence of the statement itself cannot be said that this relates to 4 in the afternoon. It relates to a much earlier time, it appears.
Shooting to here earlier in the afternoon. So I can understand it being heard about later, but it could have been heard about before it happened. And as far as we can make out, the shooting only started, the tragedy only occurred sometime after the Matunjwa left and the barbed wire was uncoiled. So that's the point of business. Anyway, Mr. Roos can put her bits of information from the various statements to the General, and the General now wants to say something. So tell us what you want to say, General.
Chairperson, I would like the clarification. What I said, it was precise that was in the radio, that I heard in the radio. The statement that I have referred to, that I heard the shooting, he doesn't specify what he heard on the radio. So maybe if the words of the people that heard the radio could also be put to me.
Yeah. Well, she put the paragraph to you. That one's rather vague, Messina. So she's got some more. Let's see how specific they are. And I've asked her to put them all to you, and listen to them all, and then you can comment. I think that's the quickest way forward, don't you think?
Okay, Chairperson.
But I take your point. Some of these statements are rather vague, and it's difficult for you to comment directly on them. Let's see them as a collection, as it were, in the totality, and then you can comment.
No, thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. So the first of the 5 statements that we have is Warrant Officer Messina, paragraph 12, who states, we then went back to the jock, the shooting started, we heard this because we were listening through the radio at the jock. The second statement is that of Captain Lust, and at paragraph 8.
What's the reference, please? Is that an exhibit or is that a new document? There was a new document of Lust, which I read
Chair,
last night.
It's item 13 on the index. I believe it is a new, it needs to be exhibited.
Well, it doesn't help to give me item numbers because I wasn't given an index, but I was given a bundle of statements which I read through last night. So let me find it. Here it is. Is the document headed Further Statement? I, Captain Paul Bismarck Lust.
Correct, Chair, and it was signed on the 7th of November, 2012.
Right. So we will mark that HHH 44. It's Further Statement. Captain Lust, dated 7/11/2012.
Chair, perhaps if we could deal with exhibit numbers, and then we'll go to the substance of the statements. The next statement is that...
What paragraph, if I've got the right Lust statement in front of me, he refers to having made 2 earlier statements. Now, we're busy with the 7 November one, are we? Now, what paragraph in that?
Paragraph 8, Chair. He states, after the shooting, a large group of the TRT...
Hang on, wait. Let's make sure the witness has got it. Have you got that statement? He hasn't yet.
Correct, Chairperson. I have the statement, paragraph 8.
Right, look at paragraph 8. Now, she's now going to read you the passage that she relies on. So listen carefully.
Chair, perhaps could I introduce all of the statements as exhibits, if we could get that housekeeping out the way, and then we could go statement by statement. So,
Yes, okay, let's do that.
So the statement by Captain Lust...
This one I've got to mark as Exhibit H 44. That's the Lust statement of November.
Thank you, Chair.
What's the next one?
The next one is that of Major General Naidu, which I'm instructed is Exhibit DD. DD.
I was going to refer to there.
In the Lust statement, it's paragraph 8.
Yes, no, you've given us that. I see that the whoever was responsible for preparing General Naidu's statement didn't believe in paragraph numbers, which was
Yes, Chair.
an interesting but foolish attitude. But
It's
what
on
page should we look
page
at? 4,
and it's the paragraph at the bottom of that page, the second paragraph on the page.
Looks like
It commences, I briefed all
looks
my
like
commanders.
the fifth. Oh, that paragraph.
Yes.
Paragraph I briefed all my commanders, and then the paragraph at the radio appears to be the fifth line of that para at between 1540 and 1545 we heard in the radio. That's right.
Correct, Chair.
All right. That's the next one, and then?
Then the statement of Brigadier Fritz, which I'm instructed is already Exhibit G8.
Yes.
And
Paragraph?
within that statement, paragraph 4.
Have you got that, Major General?
Correct, Chairperson.
And then the final statement is that by Selo Seloani, which I'm instructed is not yet an exhibit.
Is that one of the ones that you gave us?
Yes, that is a handwritten 2-page statement.
One statement, that's Selo Stephen Selowani.
Correct, Chair.
And that's Exhibit H 45, statement by,
I don't know his rank.
yes, he seems a bit shy about telling us what his rank is. Is he perhaps a lieutenant colonel? It looks at the end of his signature as a lieutenant colonel. Perhaps Mr. Gwana can tell us. Silawani, is he, or perhaps the general can. Selo Silawani, is he a lieutenant colonel?
Correct, Chairperson.
So it's the statement by Lieutenant Colonel Silawani. That's Exhibit H 45. Now, so have you got all the statements now, Major General?
Correct, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. So we have those 5 statements, and then if the witness could also have access to Exhibit F 25 the occurrence book.
Perhaps the witness could be told to which paragraph she's going to be referred in.
Entry
civil
1017.
I'm sorry, Chairperson. On Colonel Silwani's statement, which paragraph?
Paragraph 8 on the second page. It records Lieutenant Colonel's use of the radio to report the statistic of fatal wounded and the people who are already dead.
Where does it say he gave it? I suppose if he gave the statistic to Chopper 21, he could only have done that by radio. That's your point. So it's an implied reference to the radio.
Correct, Chair, and that is a reference, it's Chopper 2, not 21. Apparently that's an overzealous full stop.
Now that we've done the housekeeping, we've referred to the statements.
Okay, can I now
Now
go...
you're going to take the witness through them.
Yes, can I now go through each of those statements and the paragraphs identified for the record? Major General, if you could start with the Messinia statement.
General, siqala sibheke kwesa statement sikaMasinya.
And paragraph 12 that appears on stamped page 186 there, it states, we then went back to the jock. The shooting started. We heard this because we were listening through the radio at the jock.
Sibheke phaya kumhlathi wesi-12 kuphepha elibhalwe 186 apho ithi baye babuyela emva kwejok baye beva ngodubulo kuba bemamele kwi-radio.
If you could then pick up the statement of Captain Lust, which has now been marked as Triple H44, turning to paragraph 8 of that, it states, after the shooting, a large group of the TRT members in line moved forward toward the north, but still within the area of the first incident.
I'm misbehaving too. The microphone was not. Do me a favour, look at the witness, make sure he's got the document in front of him before you start reading, because obviously only fair he should follow. I'm not suggesting you're being deliberately unfair, but just in future do that because it'll save time, really.
I got the statement.
Thank you, Major General. And if you could turn to paragraph 8 of the statement.
Ngabheka umhlathi wesibhozo kwi-statement ezo.
I have it.
Okay. For the record, it states, after the shooting, a large group of the TRT members in line moved forward toward the north, but still within the area of the first incident. I remained behind. I called to Jock, requesting medical people to be brought in to assist the injured protesters. That's the relevant portion of that paragraph.
Emva kokudubula iqela elininzi lamalungu e-TRT aye ahamba esiya ngasentla kodwa esekufutshane nendawo leyo esenzakalo ndisalile ngasemva ndafonela ndafonela ejoko ndicela abantu abazonceda abo benzakeleyo.
Major General, if you could turn to the statement of Lieutenant Colonel Naidu, which is Exhibit DD. Sorry, Major General. Major General.
DD, is it?
Yes?
I've got it. Yes, I've got it. Yes. Page, this is page 4, is it? You said?
Yes, Major General, if you can turn to page 4 of that statement.
Correct, Chairperson, I've got it.
And the paragraph that appears at the bottom of that page, it commences, I briefed all my commanders, but if I could ask you to pay attention to the 5th line, which states, at between 1540 and 1545, we heard on the radio that the negotiation group report that they were under attack by the crowd, and thereafter the sound of gunfire erupted. At approximately 1545, I heard a call for medical assistance at Kopi 1, as well as that the veld was set alight by the strikers.
Bungaqaphela kulamgca ujo kusuka ku-1540 kuya ku-1545 sithe siselapha ejob seva kunodubulo olukhona emveni koko seva uba kufuneka uncedo kwabenzakeleyo.
Chair, if I can just note for the benefit of the commissioners that in the statement it's recorded that he heard the call for medical assistance over the radio. We assume that must be the call made by Captain Lust in the statement I've just referred to, and that's why he proceeded from forward holding area 1 to scene 2. If I can also just assist the commissioners that we know from the video evidence, in terms of the timing question, that Naidu proceeds from forward holding area 1 less than 2 minutes after the shootings at scene 1. I don't intend to take the commission to that video, but from the Lonman Fleur camera, the FLIR camera, we see there, we see General Naidu and his members traveling along the road there. It's obviously some distance from forward holding area 1, and we've managed to calculate that it will take approximately 30 seconds to get to that point in the Fleur camera. And we can see them traveling from forward holding area 1 as at 16:01:43. I don't intend to go through the video evidence. If my learned friend needs to correct that or clarify that with me, I'm happy to take that up with him in the lunch adjournment.
I don't know that the exact times are relevant for this witness. I mean, you're basically trying to establish a general principle, aren't you? And the detailed times, which may be subject to debate, they can come up later, I would have thought. Am I correct?
That's fine, Chair. If I can then, Major General, ask you to turn to Exhibit G8, which is the statement by Brigadier Fritz.
For the record, Chair, we do not accept any of the timelines to which my learned friend is referred.
No, I understand there's going to be some evidence given or presentation made in respect to the timelines, and the police will or will not have the opportunity to deal with it. But Mr. Shaskelson may have some comments to make.
Mr. Chairperson, that presentation was made several months ago and is accepted by the parties. I mean, no one has objected to it. Colonel Scott communicated to me on the day that he accepted it. There has been no one taking issue with that.
We don't have to deal with that problem now.
And
If the shoe's now pinching and there's some complaint, we'll deal with it at the appropriate time. Isn't that right?
Thank you, Chair. If I can then
Where are we
continue.
going to now?
G8, the statement by Brigadier Fritz.
Yeah.
Let's beg a power G8 statements ka Brigadier Fritz.
And Major General, could I ask you to turn to paragraph 4 of that statement on its second page? Do you have that?
Correct, Chairperson.
For the record, it reads, while I was at the JOC, General Annandale informed me that a shooting had taken place at the Kopi. I was instructed by General Annandale to climb into a chopper and fly to the area and give a situational report, SITREP. I climbed on the SAP Squirrel chopper. The chopper had no fixed video and camera recording equipment, and then he goes into who else was with him in the chopper. Chair, the point with respect to the statement by Brigadier Fritz is that Annandale, who was in the JOC, had clearly heard of the shooting and would have done so through the radio.
No.
If I can then...
Chair. No.
It sounds as if Mr. Nkiwana doesn't agree with you, and he's not a witness at the moment, but he's entitled to say that the inference you draw may not be correct. I mean, he might, for example, receive a cell phone message about that, for all we know. You assume he got it from the radio. You may be right, but it's not self-evident. There may be a cell phone message as well. Anyway, your point is that he knew in the JOC that a shooting had taken place, and he dispatched Brigadier Fritz and Lieutenant Colonel Boerter, I think it was, to, and a lady whose name I can't remember, to go into the air to see what was going on from the helicopter. And I think Fritz also had to give instructions if necessary. But anyway, you've made the point. So
Correct, Chair. And I'll move on now to Exhibit H 45, the statement by Lieutenant Colonel Seloane.
Chair, I'm sorry. The chairperson says she's made the point. I'm struggling to understand what point it is that she's made.
Well, I don't know that you have to. I don't know whether you're raising an objection or inability to understand the point. It's not an objection. But the point. But I'll try to help you. The point that she makes is that according to Brigadier Fritz, he was told by Major General Annandale that there'd been a shooting, and he was pleased to get into the helicopter and go up and give a situation report. That's the point she's made. From that, it appears that Major General Annandale knew there had been a shooting, and he dispatched Brigadier Fritz and Lieutenant Colonel Botha and others into the air. That's the point she's made. I hope you now understand it. Can you carry on, please, Mr. Kruger?
Thank you, Chair. Major General, do you have Exhibit H 45, the statement by Lieutenant Colonel Seloane?
Correct, Chairperson.
And if you could turn to the second page of that statement, paragraph 8. Do you have that?
Correct, Chairperson.
For the record, it states, I deployed members of Inyala 5 to disarm the fatal wounded strikers, which we did, and count the fatal wounded and the people who were already dead, and give the statistic for Chopper 2. From that, we infer that Lieutenant Colonel Seloane used the radio to communicate with Chopper 2.
ngokutsho kwase umnumzana Silwane uthi uye wakhupha amalungu enyala uba ayothathela izixhobo aba belimele kakhulu bakwazi ukujonga nabo babeswelekile.
We don't accept the inference.
The other point, of course, is
that
I take it it's possible to communicate. I don't know whether it happened or not, but it's possible also for Lieutenant Colonel Seloane to have communicated with Chopper 2 by cell phone. It's possible.
Yes, Chair, that would be possible. I now intend to turn to the occurrence book, though, which records specifically
Yes.
bodies are down and then gives a number,
No,
18 bodies are down. We think that is Seloane's statistic.
I understand that, but you're giving us individual items of evidence, as it were, and your commentary on them sometimes goes further than one's entitled to go on the basis of the individual item standing alone. That's the point taken by us in Luana. It's a good point. But you say you're now going to bring all these things together by referring to the occurrence book.
Yes, Chair, the occurrence book is the next aspect of the evidence. Because
Remind
of
me the exhibit number.
F 25. And specifically entry 1017 and 1018. And I'll identify the times when we get there.
singayisibheka phaa kulam kulo H 25 kulam 1017 1018 kuyincwadi yezehlakalo zemina.
You got that, Major General? It's page 25 of the typed version of the occurrence book.
I have it, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. And Major General, if you could direct your attention to the entry 1017 at 1555, it states, situation report, Papa 1 reporting the group are moving to TRT members and they try to attack them. Papa 1 reporting that the people are moving around and some are down.
Ubungabheka phaa kulamgca 10117 kwixesha lemihlanu phambi kwentsimbi yesine kuyatsho ingcele esuka kupapa 1 ithi abantu bayahamba baya ngakumalungu e-TRT kwakhona futhi upapa 1 amalungu ayahamba ayangaphambili.
Major General, if you could then look at the next entry, which is entry 1018 at 1556, situation report. Do you have that, Major General?
Ubungabheka phaa futhi
Not yet,
ku-1018 ngemizwa emine phambi kwentsimbi yesine.
It states, situation report, Papa 1 reporting the people are running towards the houses, running to the western side of the Kopi. 18 bodies are down. Chopper 1 reporting that is at the back of the Kopi. Other people are running towards Kari Hostel. And then in the same entry, if you could go next to the timestamp 1605, instruction given to the medics to go and assist at holding area. There are 30 people / bodies lying down. Major General, do you see that entry?
Upapa 1 uyachaza uba abantu bayabaleka bayangasezindlini bayabaleka bayangwela cala langasentshona la kwaye ngemizuzu emihlanu emva kwentsimbi yesine kuyafunda upapa 1 ucela ababezonceda abo balimeleyo.
Yes, Chairperson, I do see.
And Major General, to pull this all together before we take the lunch adjournment, we see, well, the South African Human Rights Commission will submit to this commission that from the 5 statements of Masinya, Lust, Naidu, Fritz, and Seloane, it is clear that the radio was being used to announce that there had been a shooting, that medical assistance was needed, that people were injured or already dead. The occurrence book we will submit records those communications on the radio. So again, returning to your evidence that you only knew of the shooting much later, once you were in the helicopter, the question to you is, in light of all of these statements and the recording in the occurrence book of radio communication announcing that there had been a shooting and that people had been injured and killed, how is it that you didn't hear this on the radio?
Chair, I object to the basis for the question, the factual basis for the question. There is no evidence. I can understand my little friend saying this is going to be their argument. But to put it as a factual proposition that from the 5 statements it shows that information was received by radio is factually incorrect from the statements themselves. Secondly, as regards timelines and relying on FFF25 for that, we've had numerous debates about the accuracy or otherwise, and in fact, the manner in which entries are made in FFF25. An example was specifically made with reference to entry 1018, that this couldn't possibly have been a contemporaneous recording in FFF25. I object to the factual foundation.
Mr. Roux, I think it's common cause, is it not, that the times in the occurrence book can't be relied on. They require adjustment and so on. The second point that emerged from the evidence, that series of entries under 1018, particularly the one at 1556, does look like a whole series of entries have been run together. And the evidence, you remember, of Major General Annandale was that various reports were being received, and they were being written down on pieces of paper, and eventually they were then entered into the occurrence book. So to that extent, Mr. Gulwan is right. I seem to remember, however, that what we were told was that what is in the occurrence book is a record of reports received by radio, do not include reports received by individuals on their cell phones. I think that's correct. I could be wrong on that.
That is my recollection as well, Chair.
What? Anyway, I wasn't sure about the last statement I made. Advocate Henrich thinks that she doesn't remember it that way. But presumably, in due course, we will be able to ascertain from other people at the JOC whether what was being recorded on the pieces of paper and then transferred into the book was only material received by radio, or we also included possible cell phone messages. But that really is the substance of the objection raised at the moment. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair, and I can make reference to 3 of the statements on which our little friend has relied. It says nothing of the kind that she's put into the witness.
We're only concerned at the moment with the occurrence book. It was quite clear, we covered that before, that a number of the statements referred to communications with people, which were not necessarily by radio. The statement didn't say so. I think that point has to be accepted. We haven't got a problem with that. The real issue is whether the notes in the occurrence book were made only on the basis of radio reports received or possibly cell phone reports received as well. And Advocate Henrich and I think Advocate Tukoto agrees that there's no evidence one way or t'other on that. It was my impression with radio reports, but my impression could be erroneous. But in any event, at some stage, we will find out from a witness who was in the JOC what exactly happened in that regard.
Yeah, correct with respect, but I'm making a slightly different point. I'm saying the statements on which my learned friend relies for the proposition that information was learned by radio is incorrect on the paragraphs on which she herself relies. For example, if one looks at the statement of the 6th of May, H8, the paragraph to which she pointed us. No, that's not the one. Sorry, I wasn't finished.
I think I've accepted that. The statements themselves, she infers that the reports were by radio. The statements don't say that. They may be by radio. They may not be by radio. We don't know. We can't accept that without more at this stage. So you don't have to address me on that. I'm with you on it.
Thank you. I'm indebted to the chair.
Chair.
The answer is you'll have to rephrase your question. The point you were making was that, and you can possibly make the point again with the necessary qualification. The point you were making is the Human Rights Commission is going to contend at the end of the day that those in Majok, as I understand you, must have known what was happening because they will contend that these entries in all the circumstances were received by radio. Of course, if that last section isn't established, then the point will fall away. But that's basically your argument, isn't it? That's what you're going to contend. Yes. And the further point is that this witness, because he was on the radio, would have known these things as well. Is that your point?
Yes, Chair. The point is that when Major General Mpembe says he only knew of the shootings and the fact that people had been injured and the fact that medical personnel were required much later in the afternoon, that this commission should not accept that testimony in light of the cumulative weight of other statements, which it is true are insufficiently detailed as to time. They are insufficiently detailed, but that should not be to the benefit of the SAPs that they have failed to provide sufficiently specific statements on this point. The South African Human Rights Commission will submit in due course that when you read those 5 statements together with the occurrence book, it is clear that had Major General Mpembe been listening on the radio, he would have learnt of the shooting a lot sooner than his evidence suggests. That is the point.
And the simple point being made, there are a number of hurdles they've got to get over in order to establish the point. But they say that they will set out to prove that a number of these communications were made by radio. It's not quite clear at this stage they were, but they're going to try to prove that. And they say they will also try to prove that what was recorded in the occurrence book was material that had been received by radio. Now, if they establish those things, they will then argue to us at the end that you, as someone who had a handheld radio, who was listening on the radio, must have known at an earlier stage than you admit that there had been shootings and bodies were down and so on. Is that your point?
Correct, Chair.
Now, how do you answer that?
Chair, with respect, she's also relying on statements, not just F25. And I'm saying it's misleading to say these statements show that the communication was done by radio.
I reformulated her question. I deliberately made it clear that she hadn't established these facts. I said she hopes to establish them in due course. If she establishes them, this is what she's going to argue. I covered all those points. And then I said to the witness, is he prepared to comment on it? There are various comments he can make, but if she's going to argue that, it's only fair that she should say, this is how we propose to establish it. Would you like to comment? He can either say it's true, or he can say it's not true, or he can say, I don't think you'll establish those points. But anyway, I mustn't suggest the things he can say. Let's hear what his answer is. You
Chair,
understand the point being made. They say that you are not being truthful when you say that you didn't know until much later there had been shootings, and they're going to endeavour to establish, whether they'll succeed or not is another matter, they will endeavour to establish that there was a lot of radio traffic which indicated that you should have known that there were shootings. So that's their argument. They're going to raise that at the end. Would you like to comment on it now, or it's for you to decide what answer you give?
Bazoqokelela ubungqina obuzovuma ukuba ngokwe-statement ezingakuya ngu-OP. Wena njengomuntu obephethe iradio kunowenza enoba uvile uthethathethwana obelukhona kwaye ufanele uba waze ngaphambili kokuba usitsho wena uba kunabantu abonzakeleyo nabaswelekileyo.
Chairperson, in my statement, and also maybe I'll have to check my evidence to the Commission. and I'll have to deal with each statement and check exactly what I said and compare with what the advocate is saying.
Anyway,
To establish what she's saying is correct in terms of what I'm saying. So
well, surely you can remember whether you heard on the radio that there was shooting or not. If you didn't hear on the radio there was shooting, and that's why you didn't know there was shooting until much later, then that's your answer. If she wants to disprove it, she's going to have to prove a number of things that she hasn't proved yet. But the simple question is, did you hear on the radio reports which made it clear to you that there had been shootings and that people had been shot?
I've said no, Chairperson, but the communications of the line of TRT is being attacked. I heard it. But that was not a conclusive proof that there was a shooting. And there are a number of statements, Chairperson, and including Major General Annandale, that he has referred to, that he also said. So that's why I wanted, maybe I should go in terms of details as she did with those statements and also give my version so that it could be clear. But if that is sufficient for the Commission, that is correct.
So far, I would have thought it's enough for the time being. So. Can we take the lunch adjournment now, Ms.?
Yes, Chair. I must just request guidance from the Commissioners, however, because my learned friend from the SABC is making objections saying there's a failure to establish particular times with specificity. There's a failure to establish whether it's radio or cell phone messages. There's a failure to establish this, that, and the other thing. The reason nobody in this room can establish that is because the SABC have provided inadequate statements. In addition, we don't know whether these witnesses will be called in due course. So to now have an objection ruled because we are unable to establish facts because it's in the SAP's power to provide or withhold that information.
It may be that was in their power to give the information, they didn't give it to you, and maybe you're at a disadvantage, but you can't then sort of turn that around and then say that you're therefore entitled to say this was radio material. As far as the timelines are concerned, I understood there was a special meeting of the parties in which the timelines were discussed, and apparently, according to what Mr. Shackleton tells us, accepted by the police representative of the meeting, Colonel Scott. Perhaps when he comes as the next witness, that matter can be dealt with briefly. As far as the other points are concerned, if the statements are inadequate, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. You can't rely upon what you say the statement should have said in order to establish a fact that may not be correct. But anyway, the point's been covered.
But the difficulty is this. For my client, in its participation and attempt to assist the Commission in finding out what happened on that day, we're provided with inadequate statements by the SAPs. We are then prevented in the progress of our cross-examination because of the inadequacy of those statements. We are told that there will be supplementary statements to come who knows when. Hence, the evidence leaders requested a ruling this morning following engagement so that we have a deadline to that. Because the cross-examination is severely undermined and handicapped if we don't have the full body of the SAP's case.
Yeah, the short point is this. The police, at the very beginning, when the Commission was appointed, promised their full cooperation with the Commission. And what has happened is from time to time, queries have been addressed to the police asking for extra information, and to be fair, it's been given. I'm not sure, I think some of it may still be outstanding, but certainly, as far as we can tell, endeavours have been made to provide the information sought. So what I suggest you do is very simple. And you yourselves have written letters to the police asking for information. What you can do, I think there are 5 items we're busy with. You can ask the police to confirm whether the communications referred to in the various statements to which you have referred were made by radio or some other way. And when you get the answer back, you can then take the point further.
Chair, one final point.
Sorry, can I?
Yes.
What you've done, in fact, you've assumed that the communications were by radio. They weren't necessarily by radio. And you booked your cross-examination on an assumption which may be erroneous. But never mind, let's not worry about that. Ask them for the full information you need, and then come back and deal with it. And that way we can save time. I understand how this problem arose, but that's water under the bridge. Let's not look back. We don't want to have the fate of Lot's wife. Let's just move forward, and when you get the information that you're going to ask for, you can return to the point. If the General's out of the witness box by then, we can possibly get him back later, so you can put it to him shortly. All right?
Chair, I must just make 2 final points. The first is that we will certainly engage with our learned friends for the SAPs to try to get even more clarity. But it is the SAP's obligation to provide this commission with sufficient detail and as much of a record as is possible. So the obligation is not necessarily on the other parties to chase the SAPs. It's for the SAPs to provide that information. But we will engage with them and attempt to clarify. But the final point that I must make is that the reason this is all the more problematic is because the only version that will now be put in person before this commission is that of the SAPs. The other eyewitnesses are no longer present. They are not participating, and we don't know whether they will be able to come and provide that evidence.
I don't understand what you're talking about. At the moment, the issue is whether the people, as I understand you, the people in the jock and this witness in a helicopter knew that there had been shootings and when they knew it. That's an issue. I don't know who the eyewitnesses are who you are referring to.
Chair, I'm referring to the injured and arrested miners. I'm making a broader point, which is that given the lack of specificity in what we have from the SAPs, the fact that we don't know what will come in the supplementary statements, given that we don't have the other eyewitnesses, we have the SAPs and we have injured and arrested miners. Those are the 2 groups of eyewitnesses that could assist this commission. We only have one of those groups now present. It's a broader point that I'm making,
Mr. Roux,
not relating to the precise question.
Mr. Roux, on the issue as to whether the people in the jock and or the Major General in the helicopter knew when the shootings took place, that's not an issue on which the injured and arrested miners can give any direct evidence of their own at all. So the fact that they're not here to tell us this takes the matter no further. The information that we have may well, if supplemented in the way I've suggested, indicate the answer to the question, because extra information you get in response to the queries you've asked may well provide what is missing. So that's the point that to be raised there. The further point is, in relation to the criticism of the police, I don't think we can say that the police knew when these statements were drafted that it was important to know whether the communications were by radio or otherwise. So we can't say their failure to provide that information is somehow an inadequacy which gives rise to criticism. They had an enormous amount of statements to prepare. There were all sorts of topics they had to discuss. Whether their minds were focused on the question of whether communication was by radio or not is not clear to me, and I don't think we can assume that to be the case. But we've thrashed the matter out. I'm sure you'll get the cooperation that you want from the police. They promised it from the very beginning. Let's rely on that. Yes. I'm reminded of the fact that you said the only voice we'll get will be the evidence of the police. The rulings that you sought us to make, and which we made, provided that the persons who are now absent, their versions will be presented to the Commission by the evidence leaders. They will have the power to call these people if they wish. We've got the 2 statements that were filed by Mr. Mpofu, the witnesses he was proposing to call. We can subpoena them if necessary. There are something like 300 IPID statements of these persons who were interviewed by IPID. The evidence leaders have, I'm informed, gone through all those statements, and if necessary, they can lead further witnesses in order to ensure that the version of the survivors, the injured and arrested miners, that those versions are before the Commission, so that the Commission will be able, at the end of the day, to present a report which is not one-sided, based solely on what the police say, but it's based on evidence from the people who are currently absent as well. And also, you must not forget, we're not dependent in this Commission only on direct testimony. There's also circumstantial evidence, which may well be in some ways more powerful than the evidence of witnesses whose credibility may be under attack. And furthermore, there's a mass of video material which is being carefully analyzed, and also, I think there's also audio material as well. All that material, and there are also photographs that were taken, all that material will be before the Commission. So to suggest that our report will be one-sided, will be based only on the version of the police, is in the circumstances of the particular issue we're concerned with, not correct. And I think it's important that I make that clear so that everybody understands what the position is. I'm not suggesting that you went so far as to suggest that, But it is a belief that's present that's held in certain quarters, and the sooner the correct position in that regard is made clear, the better. At this point, we'll take the lunch adjournment.
Chair, can I? No, I'm not responding, Chair. I just want to clarify.
I've adjourned for lunch. You can say what you want to do after lunch.
sake sithatha ixesha siyofaka uyethunjini
people being down, and then there's a subsequent one, which is the one that we've heard.
Uyachaza umhlekazi apha kokuba kukho intetho ezininzi enye zivele kupapa ezinye zavela kwichopper uyachaza ukuba ichopper 1 ekabani ichopper 2 ekabani kodwa le ntetho le yavela kupapa 1 ekuyilenyana kaBrigadier Khalid.
Chair, I don't remember the evidence as the chairperson remembers it, as regards what the witness said on his way to the chopper.
Sorry, you did tell us, did you not, that when you were on your way to the helicopter, after you left the jock in the vicinity of the jock, you had your handheld radio in your hand, and you heard that report which I read out from the currents book. That's correct, isn't it?
Kunjalo uyavumelana naye umhlekazi okokuba ngeli xesha esiya kwi-helicopter wayiva le ntetho apha kwiradio ivela kule kapapa 1 njengoba ibhaliwe.
Mr. Roux, it's your cross-examination. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Major General Mpembe, to go back to my question, in paragraph 49 of your witness statement, where you say, I then heard Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak reporting over the radio that there were bodies down, are you referring to that clip of the audio that we've now heard twice?
Uzapho general okokuba le ntetho ebethetha ngayo ile ntetho ibivele phaya sive kabini.
Chairperson, the one that I heard, it's when Brigadier Khalid said to him, why the vehicles are still at the back. He must check for him. That's the one that I heard. But in this video, I didn't hear. Maybe it can go a little bit backward. But the one that made me to understand that there is a problem is when Brigadier Khalid said, why are still people at the back?
Into eyandenza kokuba ndibe nokukhathazeka xa ndiva uBrigadier Khalid ethi intoni izingqele zisemi phaya emva.
Then that's when Colonel Vermaak went to check, and when he reported that he see bodies down.
Ngeli xesha ke uColonel Vermaak aya kujonga wabuya ke wenza ingxelo ukuba ubona kukho imizimba ephaya phansi.
Major General, I don't want to move from this point. I will just note for the record that in Exhibit G 35, which is the transcript of the Protea Coin helicopter video prepared by the team for the South African Human Rights Commission, you're correct that before this part of the audio, which jock, chopper, two bodies at the back of the second copy, 2 bodies, there is audio from, and Major General Annandale identified some of those voices as being Khalid's with respect to, directing the Signala to move up, that canter to go there. So you're correct in the overall audio where this clip is identified. I'll move on once that's translated.
Uthi ndivumelana nawe xa usithi wayiva le ntetho njengoba ivezwa apha ikhona kubungqina ku-GG 35 okokuba yenzeka ngolo hlobo njengoba uchaza into wayiva kule nqwele.
So, Major General, with that clarification, and from the transcript, this is the only time that we hear anybody talk about 2 bodies down. Are you comfortable with where we are in your flight? That this is when Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak announces 2 bodies down.
When elsikile ukuba apha ke uyatsho njengoba esitsho njengoba simva ukuba kukho imizimba emibini ephansi.
Chairperson, I'm requesting that may I hear that voice of Brigadier Khalid, because I didn't hear it here.
I think that's fair, because the section we heard, I think, started just after that point, and obviously it's important for you to hear the voice just before the passage we saw and heard, and you can then identify the voice, perhaps.
Ewe phambi kokuba utsho ukuba ngubani ibaluleke gqithi into yokuba umamele uve kakuhle ukuba lelizwi likabani elo.
Chair, if we can then go... It may then just make sense to play from the beginning of the video, because the audio all the way through is water cannon go there, Nyala go there. So perhaps we need to go all the way back to...
Advocate Hemrod just pointed out to me that the A female voice says, "Brigadier, can we deploy the canters to help you?" That's at 11:25. Perhaps that... and then according to the note that she has made, there's a male voice, which is that of Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak, says, "Jock Chopper," and then there's another male voice, which is described as being that of Brigadier Carlitz, saying, "Small copy, we've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arrests." But that's all from 11:25. So is that the passage that you want? Perhaps we don't have to have the whole thing if the relevant section is at 11:25. Is that correct, Ms. Leroux?
No, Chair. My understanding is the Major General wanted earlier where Carlitz is directing Inyalas and water cannons. Is that correct, Major General? That's what you wanted?
No, Chairperson.
ayisela indawo efuna ugeneral apho umajor iyalela khona ukuba maziyephi izingcola njengoba esitsho umgcini sihlalo kokuba xa siyithatha apha ku11:25 kula kuvakala khona le ntetho yabantu imizimba ephansi nabantu abasithandathu sebabanjiwe.
We start at 11:25. Would you want an earlier passage?
Chair, we can start at 11:25.
All right.
Utsho masiqale ku11:25.
Chair, may I say something about triple G 35, to which my learned friend has intimated? I understand that this is a transcript that's been prepared by the South African Human Rights Commission. It was subject to an agreement, an agreed version being presented. I'm not aware of us being approached to do that, but I'm not going to object to its being
the
used.
point you make is reminding them that there's supposed to be agreement still. No, but we're only using it as a kind of index to find the relevant passage for the moment.
Le G35 ethetha ngayo itranscript enziwe ngabaka human rights kodwa ke akuzange kuthethwe nabanye abameli amaqala ukuba kuyavunyelwana ngayo na.
Mr. Chairperson, if I might come in there. It is of crucial importance that we get agreement on this transcript. And SABC have now had this draft for several months. I wonder if they might come back to us with the specific problems that they have with this transcript.
I take it what you said has been heard and noted, and we will have a reply reasonably soon.
In due course. Thank you, Chair.
Uthi bakasabsibana selixesha banayo levile uzithi umhlekazi ungelwane sizokwenza kokuba ivele kubekho le ntetho kuvunyelane ngenzo ekuvunyelana ngazo.
And if I might ask a favor from SABC in this regard, SABC are peculiarly well placed to identify the voices. So instead of male voice, female voice, where SABC can say Colonel Vermaak, Brigadier Carlitz, etc., we would welcome that too.
That's already in evidence. Sorry.
According to what Advocate Hemraj told me a moment ago, her recollection is that this clip was shown while General Annandale was in the box, and he identified the voices, but
not all of them, and not
all
exhaustively.
I see. All right. I'm sure that point's also been noted by your learned friends from SABC.
Unina Allendale wachaza kokuba ngamazwi obani uthi umhlekazi uShakalsana akawachaza ngaonke.
Thank you, Chair. So if we could play the clip from 11:25.
They're going to break through. They're going to try to break